The value of a vintage and classic car is very directly associated to its originality.
How do you essentially, when I look at these cars now, or when you look at anything, you talk about crypto, you try to understand how is the value derived, right? There are questions regarding that. You look at any asset or something you buy, you see if there's, intrinsic value in something like that. When you look at vintage cars, I'm just trying to understand from a value perspective, how do you go about valuing a car? What are different parameters that are involved in valuing a vintage car?
See, I mean, again, when we talk about vintage and classic cars, it's not like it's an abundant supply of them. And secondly, I would not even want to commoditize something like that, right? Because they are, at the end of the day, they're all pieces of art.
Yeah.
And today, I mean, as we progress year by year, it becomes a little tougher to procure such cars. So some cars are imported, some cars were probably imported years back into India. And yeah, so the value of these cars, basically, when we talk about it, in contrary to how we see today, people modify cars, how people get into the mod culture, they want to change up how a car looks. The value of a vintage and classic car is very directly associated to its originality.
Okay.
How original it is. So whenever let's say there's a show which takes place, a concours show, a rally which takes place, the parameters which they check are that if how the engine health of the car is, how well is it restored, the paint job on the car, how original is the restoration when it comes to using the right parts, the mechanical components, the meters, the switches, every little bit about it, from the let's say the wheel caps of the car which was used in that era to what are put onto the cars now. Any sort of a mismatch, you minus your points on that. So that's it. You have to be very precise and specific about how the car is to be put out.
Okay. Even if you're modernizing it, it brings down the value because it's not original.
Modernizing in what sense?
Modernizing in terms of using, say, a different part that will enhance, say, the drivability, but it brings down the originality.
Yes, originality is key. Originality is key. So I mean, people have different. Some people, people must be doing that as well. But the idea is that for the kind of community which is built around vintage and classic cars, people want to keep their car as original. And the great bit is that people are getting into, owners and restorers are getting into greater depths of the entire. They're getting into greater depths to understand how they can preserve that car and how they can get that car back to how it was probably 50, 60, 70 years back when it was leaving the showroom back in the day, or the dealership. And today, Indian cars are being restored at a standard which is probably, I'd say, world class, which can go and compete with the best in the world. And there are a few which have gone cars have gone for international shows abroad.
Okay.
And they've come back with laurels.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So it's great for the vintage and classic automotive scene.
Wonderful. I was thinking of something when I asked you about this value thing ना, जैसे हम दारू की बात करते हैं, वाइन की बात करते हैं, so the older it gets, the more costlier it gets. Is there a similar correlation in ideally vintage cars? कि फिर how do you compare it to, say, the original cost, just to understand from a...
Again, it depends. So
if you could give me an example.
So vintage cars, so I just to talk about it from a perspective of, you're talking about value appreciation.
Yes.
So when let's say, it obviously depends on the rarity of a car. It depends on the demand I mean, obviously there are a few. It's a very niche field altogether. So it's not like everyone would be out there knowing it, demanding for it, and the supply obviously is not there.
Correct.
But yes, if a car is well restored, it's completely original, and is very few in numbers, the car does over the years grow in value. Again, as long as it's kept kept the way it should be kept.
Right.
At the same time, there are some cars which so usually they will not break value, but the appreciation point of view, like let's say when we talk about, I would not actually want to give a specific name to a car because it's not appropriate when it comes to owners.
Okay.
But there are some cars probably which are available relatively in much higher number.
Yeah.
And there are some cars which are available probably one or two in the country. So if you have a car, just from a very, let's just talk about from a common sense point of view, that if there's a car where there are only one or two or five in the country, and probably out of those five, you have the most originally restored car, you can probably you're in that position to demand for your price. But at the same time, if there are a few cars which were, let's say, produced in large numbers and kind of stayed on in India or were imported later, and there are still a lot of them available in abundance. Maybe they might be available restored, they might be available unrestored, but access to them is a little more in comparison to
Of course.
that rare car. They will probably not appreciate in value as much.
Understood.
But nonetheless, if we see a graph over the years, every vintage car, every classic car has appreciated in value, and by a great considerable amount. Whether we talk about an entry level car, which starts with a mere few lakhs, and if we compare it to, the Packards, Rolls Royces, Bentleys, which obviously have also appreciated in large quantities, in large numbers.